Welcome, everyone, to the opening plenary Fathers Panel, Understanding the Mindset and Needs of Low-Income Fathers.
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that I would never be able to get over it and that my kids wouldn't have a father. I overdosed on heroin and I lived. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. For the longest time, fear held me back from ultimately being who I wanted to. I found the fatherhood program, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. My desire to change had finally outweighed my desire to stay the same. I felt powerless for so much of my life that it's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. For the first time, I finally feel like I'm exactly where I should be, where I want to be.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Patrick Patterson. I'm facilitating this amazing panel. I'm the manager for the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse. It is my indeed pleasure to bring to you guys one of our most anticipated sessions for this next couple days. You just saw PSAs that featured both of our speakers for today, Mr. Joseph Stiltner and Mr. Harold Green. You're going to hear much more about them. I've talked to these gentlemen. I've worked with these gentlemen. We've done some PSAs and some things together. And so I think you're in for a treat. Our goal really is here to do a couple of things. One is to celebrate and learn from some amazing fathers. These gentlemen are amazing. You will hear that as you're talking. Each of them will speak from their personal experience. They work for, they lead organizations, but their comments will be from their personal experience. And then last but not least, we're going to dedicate some time for you guys to ask questions. So I want you to feel comfortable asking questions by using the chat box so we can actually get to as many questions as we can. We're going to allocate some time at the end just for this. Last thing I'll say is this is a chance to really share and learn. So working with low-income fathers, working with fathers, there is no one way to do it. And so we want to hear directly from some fathers to talk about it. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Joseph to just introduce himself in the way that you want to. Joseph, the time is yours.
My name is Joseph Stiltner, and I work for a local fatherhood organization that also was instrumental in turning my life around, and I'm happy to be here with everybody, and I know it's going to be a great discussion.
Awesome. Harold, talk to us.
How's everybody doing? My name is Harold Green. I'm a father from Chicago, Illinois. Also a poet, an author, and all of that great stuff. So I'm just really excited to be a part of this discussion today.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Two amazing gentlemen, two amazing fathers. And so you're going to hear that. They both have varied experience, not only in the field of working fathers, but they've seen life. And so we're going to hear some of that as well. But I'm going to start off with an icebreaker and a question I'm going to pose to Joseph and Harold. But I want you to use the chat box to answer this question. I want you to finish the sentence for me. You can use the chat box. I wish that fathers knew. I wish that fathers knew. You can finish that sentence by using the chat box. So I'm going to toss it to Harold. Finish that sentence for me, Harold. I wish that fathers knew.
I wish that fathers knew it's okay to have a soft spot.
You left me hanging. I got to hear the rest of it.
I really wanted to hang, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I think so often that we are mentally programmed to believe that it's our job to just be the rock, and water travels so much further, and I think it's important to know that we have to, as well as mothers, we have to present those soft landings for our children as well. Children need that from both sides. We need to be able to create safe spaces and places where, our children can confide in us, and we too can show them vulnerability. We too can show them that there are, levels to being a human, it's not just one dimensional.
Powerful, powerful. Joseph, same question. I wish that fathers knew. Finish that sentence for me.
That was a great answer by Harold. And I would also say, I wish fathers knew that they're just as valuable as mothers. One of the things that I constantly heard growing up, as a boy about manhood and fatherhood was that you were there to provide financially, and that kind of seemed like that's all your job was.
Mm-hmm.
We play a critical role in the nurturing and the emotional growth and aspect of our children too. So I want fathers to know that you are just as important as mothers are.
Yeah. If I think about kind of level setting for this session, a lot of folks who work with fathers, they have their own experiences. And I believe that some people bring those things to the work, whether they're positive or negative. If I think about some untruths, so we have an audience full of people who work with fathers or who are about to start working with dads, some untruths, some things that just are not real that people need to know the facts about. So for example, for me, I've heard for years that men don't talk. It's not true. It's not true. In a safe space, he's going to share and he's going to bear it all. And I've seen it. I've done it myself when they feel comfortable, when we feel comfortable. So what's another untruth to help people understand how to work with fathers? And I'm going to start with you, Joseph. What's an untruth? Something that just is not true. It's a myth that people need to unlearn to start doing this work with fathers.
I'll go back to kind of what I said earlier. A lot of times we hear that fathers may be deadbeats. And, and you've said it, Patrick, and I've heard it a lot from others. It's not deadbeat, it's just dead broke. And if kind of what we've been told and programmed as boys, and maybe what we've observed through, the older men that were fathers in our life is that our worth is tied to what we can provide financially. A lot of times a man feels like he can't be a good dad if he can't provide financially. And that may cause some fathers to not be there because they feel that not adequate or they can't provide. So it's not that they don't want to be there. It's just if you've been told that you're here to provide financially and you can't do that, that may be a reason that fathers, feel guilt or might not come around as much as they would like to because of, what we've been told.
Mm-hmm. Powerful. An untruth, Harold, that people need to know. Just it ain't true about working with men and fathers.
I think it's an untruth that fathers only care about sports.
Mm.
I think that's important to bring up because when we're thinking about programming and we're thinking about resource and we're thinking about working with fathers, I think we can get narrow-minded a lot of times, and we can have, a father and son baseball game or father and son basketball game, and it becomes this confining space of only thinking that fathers care about athletics when it comes to their kids, and fathers
Mm-hmm.
are so multidimensional. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
monolith. Like we can have, father and child read-alongs, we can have father and child dances, we can have father and child day at the,
Mm-hmm.
picnic or whatever, whatever the case may be. And I think it expands. That's why I think, programming for mothers is so easy to do because we are already mentally trained that mom's gonna do whatever. It's whatever. We
Yeah.
can throw
Yeah.
anything out there and it's cool.
Yeah.
And we gotta have that same type of experimental and welcoming mindset when it comes to fathers and men too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As is the case in working with fathers, you have plans for outreach and recruitment, and you must adjust. And so, in my mind, one of my favorite quarterbacks, I'm thinking about something I hear him say all the time, is Omaha. As I think about Peyton Manning and calling an audible. And so we're prepared to go live in case there was a power outage, but we're also ready to continue the conversation. So where we were in the conversation was around myths and realities. And we were hearing from Joseph and Harold. You saw the video from both of them. They're going to join me on screen in a second. But I'll also ask you guys to put in the chat box, finish this sentence. A father is. A father is. However you want to finish that sentence, use the chat box because I see some great feedback and comments from you guys in here as well. A father is, R. Parker said caring. Diego said a nurturer. Needed, I love that. Vital, necessary, important, and more important, influence. Compassionate. These are all the things we want to see from you guys as we think about the work that we're doing, Father. So I'm going to go back to Harold and Joseph. Harold, there? Joseph, you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
Yes,
hear
sir.
you.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
awesome. Let's talk about a word that we often need to think about when it comes to working with dads. And one of those is healing. You know, you can teach them skills, you can teach them how to get a job, you can teach them some parenting, but there are things that are beneath the surface that I think we also need to be able to address. So when you think about healing and working with fathers, particularly during the pandemic, the numbers of men and families that have been affected by the pandemic are off the charts. But if I think about healing, how do you approach the topic of healing a father? Joseph, I know you work with dads every day in Myrtle Beach. Healing, what does that come into play when you come working with fathers specifically?
It plays a critical part because the thing about children is they're mirrors. You know, as you're raising children, it has this special ability to kind of shine a light on some things that you thought you may have been over or that you thought you may have dealt with. You know, I see myself in my kids, you know, daily in the situations that they face. And you know, one of the things that I realized in order for me to really be a great dad to my kids and to be the best version of myself, I had to heal from the wounds I had from the relationship with my father. And the more that the more that I parent and father my children was the more I realized that that was something I really needed to heal from. I told myself for years, I'm okay, I'm good, I'm over it, I'm over it. And things would happen, I realized, you know, I wasn't. You know, my father and I were able to talk, hash things out, and we have a great relationship now. But and he's a great grandfather. You know,
Mm,
he's a better grandfather than he ever was a father.
mm,
But I love that my kids have that, even if it meant I didn't.
yeah, yeah. What do you think happened that made him go from your experience as a father and now he's a great grandfather? What do you think changed, if anything?
As he said, you know, kind of about kids being mirrors. You know, the grandkids being around. He looks at it as, you know, he couldn't give us his best at the time, my sister and I,
Yeah.
and the grandkids, because my sister also has kids.
Mhm,
So the grandkids are kind of what he looks like as a second chance, you know, a way to kind of, you know, right those wrongs and to take what
yeah.
he learned from being a father and apply it to being, you know, an even better grandfather.
Yeah, powerful, powerful. Harold, I'm gonna throw a question at you. You're in Chicago. You're in a city that is a bustling metropolis, as you call it. Lots of activity. The city is full of people. If you were talking to somebody who's on here today, who's just starting to work with fathers, and they're trying to figure out how do you recruit if they're in an urban or metropolitan area, what's your advice or guidance to them around making contact with guys who may be in larger cities?
I think it comes down to breaking it down, making it fractional, you know, and not trying to attack it with a wide net. Because I think sometimes when you do that, people kind of can sense and smell the disingenuousness of it, you know. So I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes kind of breaking it down to smaller chunks in order to make a bigger impact is important.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of like trying to hit the whole city. Let's go to this neighborhood, or let's go to
Mm-hmm.
this particular block, or let's go to this particular side of town, and then
Mm-hmm.
because even in Chicago, as segregated as it is, and broken up into parts and fractions, like it's different on the south side than it is on the west side.
Yeah.
It's different on the west side than it is on the north. So you have to learn the regions within the city.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to break it down to fractions.
Okay. Okay. That's powerful. Do you think for staff that are hired to work in a particular town, whether it's Chicago Myrtle Beach, some part of Florida. Does the staff need to be from that community to work in that community, or can they be from the outside? What's your thoughts on that, Harold?
I always think it's best to be from the place when you're talking about doing work like this. But I do know you can absolutely not be from the place if you know how to be a humanitarian. You know, if you
Yeah.
know how to connect with people on a genuine level, if you know how to get a human response out of someone instead of asking them what's wrong, providing yourself, being of service first,
Mhm.
instead of
Mhm.
asking what the problem is, be of service and open up that space for communication. I think that you can absolutely get the results you're looking for if you're an outsider.
Mhm. Yeah, I see servant leadership in the chat box. Um, Jorge Navarez says, if they're from the outside, empathy and inclusive practices and approach is key. Drop your thoughts in the chat box. As we're having a conversation, you're part of the conversation. Know how to be a humanitarian. Beautiful. The comment, know your comment here, Harold. Joseph, I want to speak about something that you've been very public about. You've shared that you have overcome drugs and alcohol. And in many instances, some of our programs are working with fathers who may still be dealing with that. So the common adage is you give a man a job, then he can survive and treat himself. Is getting him a job the first thing, or what might be the best approach for a guy who may still be using or struggling with substances?
It's important that you meet fathers, where they're at. If when I went to a fatherhood program when I was trying to change my life around, and I was just getting clean from drugs and substances. If as soon as I walked in the door, I was told, "Hey, we got this job opportunity." One, I would have lost the job anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And two, I'd have probably walked out. A job, you got to be able to keep a job. You got to meet people where they're at. And the main issue I was going through, yeah, I might have been unemployed, but that would always be the case if I didn't take the time to address the more immediate needs, I was going through inside, whether it was substance use or healing from traumatic, experiences and events and trying to put the pieces back together. You have to lay a solid foundation first, or everything else you build upon is just going to crumble anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the job is not necessarily the first thing he needs.
No, it's easy to get a job, but it takes a lot to keep one and really excel at it.
Yeah.
So, if that foundation isn't laid, a job isn't going to solve the problems.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you respond, Harold, to the notion that men should man up? This pandemic has broken a lot of people down. The numbers on suicide, the numbers of people who have anxiety issues. We're talking about fatherhood in a pandemic. The number of issues of men who have really just struggled. I can't tell you how many guys I've spoken to privately that are in the company of a lot of people but feel lonely.
Mm.
So think about the space that men are in, and the common phrase that we hear from guys is "I'm good."
Mm-hmm.
I'm good. Um, how do you respond to that when you think about the space that we're in and the need to actually serve fathers in the space and time?
I think, even going back to the original question of like the man up situation,
Mm-hmm.
I think I think in this day and time when we are really examining what gender is and we're examining what masculinity is, and the phrase toxic masculinity has really become
Mm-hmm.
a driving force behind a lot of conversation, and
Mm-hmm.
some may feel like it's extreme or it's over the top, but you have to be extreme in order to really dissect things that have been toxic, that
Yeah.
have been the catalyst for breakdowns, what I'm saying, for so many over the years and over the decades have not felt safe to speak up and say, hey, I'm not okay. I'm not all right. And that comes from the labeling and the misnomers that are put on men to be a certain way. You know,
Mhm.
if we see a woman breaking down at a public transportation stop, she may get empathy. Somebody may, put their hand on her shoulder, or things
Mhm.
may be like, man, I get it, I understand. You see a man like that, and then it's like, oh, he weak. What's wrong with him? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? That's a punk. I ain't gonna. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It turns into this snowball effect that
Mhm.
makes outsiders, or makes onlookers say, well, let me not be that guy. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And I
Yeah.
think that it's so many layers to this conversation that
Yeah.
we have to, as workers and servants in this space, have to be the ones to push the conversation and narrative forward to say, no, that's a human reaction. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with man or woman. That's a human reaction. We are not always okay, and that's
Yeah.
okay. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And I
Yeah.
think that really is important to pass down to the next generation, because for so long, I think that has killed a lot of men from the inside out.
Yeah. 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 I remember a familiar quote from one of my really seasoned veteran friends. And he said to me when I first started doing this work some years ago, he said, men are socialized to internalize. That
Mm-hmm.
from young boy age, when a boy falls down, till he's in his 20s and crying at his wedding. In many of these situations, they are told, man up, be strong. When in truth, the same emotions that men have or that women have, men have. And what I
Right.
found some of the best programs, you think about the space you're in, is we want to share how we feel, but that has
Mm-hmm.
that is created for him to make that, that known. I'm hurt. You said in our first conversation, Harold, there's some guys who walk around with a broken heart since 8th grade. They're 50 now, and their heart was
Mm-hmm.
broken in 8th grade. And he's doing a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
things to feel that. You finish. I
Yeah.
mean, talk about how long and how much of an effect that has on a guy, even years later.
The trajectory is crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't think about that even when going back to the healing part. We think about healing in so many different social studies type ways, things that we can visually see. Like, you
Yeah.
need to heal. If your arm is broken, you need to heal from that. If you lost your job, we can see that you're broke. You need to heal from that moment. If you
Mhm.
had, alcoholism or any kind of other abuses, like you got to heal. But we got to think about internal things too. You know what I'm saying? Like we have men out here who, got turned down or got cheated on in middle school, and now they 50 years old, they never addressed that thing. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? And they walking around with the heaviness of a broken heart.
Yeah.
And that is something that men are not always given the space to talk about or to heal from or to learn from.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think one of the most beautiful things about feminism is that they are asking to be treated as equal, right?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of times we don't internalize that for men as part. For us is we got to be emotional too. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because emotions are part of human nature. If we don't
Mhm.
address that part as men, we are going to implode.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see it. We see it all the time.
Absolutely, all the time, all the
It's no
time.
wonder to me when I see in certain communities, I've done work in prisons, when I've seen guys who are like, they cannot contain their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this guy is wild. I'm like, yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the size of a pebble in his shoe that needs to be addressed. Made him
Yep.
that upset. So I think we have to think about like the deeper issue. I got a few minutes. I got two questions I want to pose to you guys. If you're thinking about programs, Joseph, and who they hire, what are some of the characteristics? You were in a program, now you're working in a program. What are some of the characteristics of a staff person that you'd hope people would look for when they're hiring somebody to work in a fatherhood program?
I think one of the biggest things is life experience. Education. I'm not downplaying education. It's important, but lived experience really goes a long way. Being able to be empathetic, and I know I've been through a lot of different situations, and at the fatherhood organization I work at, You know, we see men, fathers, all walks of life, from doctors, attorneys, to fathers that are currently dealing with homelessness. And the kind of like the more experiences that you've had that you can draw on, it's difficult to get men to open up sometimes. So if there's a shared experience that you have, you know, you're able to kind of cut through some things and make somebody comfortable a lot quicker
Yeah.
instead of, you know, trying to feel each other out. I know I was hesitant to open up, but the caseworker that helped me, he just had this air about him where he was just one of the most genuine people I've ever met in my life, and that's still true.
Yeah.
You know, just that opening, welcoming, you could tell they cared. You know,
Mhm.
there's a lot of jobs you can go to and kind of fake the funk, you know, fake your
Mhm.
way through it. This line of work's not it. It's
Nah.
not it.
Nah.
You can tell right away if somebody really care, if somebody
Yeah.
really wants to work with you, if somebody heart is really in it. We can
Yeah.
tell it from a mile away.
Yeah.
This isn't the kind of work you can just, you know, kind of put on cruise control and go through on autopilot.
Yeah. 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 Men have been, in my experience, particularly guys who have had challenges. We've had to read people, we had to read situations quickly, or you're in danger if you don't do that quickly. I think in the same situation with fatherhood programs, you know, the word that I love to hear is just authentic engagement. Um, there's a famous African quote that I live by is that you cannot correct me unless you're connected to me. And so the average Joe sees a kid and says, pull your pants up, and the kid reacts a little bit funny, like, yo, who you talking to? But
Right.
his coach, you with me, Harold? His high school coach, who hasn't
Absolutely.
in 5 years, says to him, listen, boy, pull your pants up. He pulls his pants up. The difference between the two scenarios is there's no connection in that first, but there's
Absolutely.
in the second. So I think about your point, Joseph, about the shared experience. Now, do I have to have gone to prison? Do I have to have used drugs? I'm not saying that. Joseph is not saying that. But there has to be some appreciation for the journey that these guys are going through or that we're going through with these guys. The other word that comes to mind is just the lack of judgment. In all of the years I've seen people like Joseph and Harold do this work, when I've heard them talk to fathers, one of the things that most guys complain about that they do not want when they walk into a room is the feeling of being judged. And is that a skill that you can teach? I don't know. I don't know. But I know how it feels when I walk into a restaurant and I don't have on a jacket and they still say, sir, right this way. I know that good feeling. So it's important that we find create the space where the guys feel welcome, where they feel embraced, and they feel a part of the program. And so my last question, and I'm looking at the chat box, there's some questions coming through. I'm gonna try to get through several of these quotes, but I wanted to ask Harold this last question, but I want to just make one last comment about the healing piece with our fathers. One of the things that has been evident is that a lot of our guys have been socialized to internalize. And so what I've learned and what I've seen from many of you, I see Lamar Henderson on here. I see Ricky Barr. I see Charles Dillon on here. I see a lot of people that I know who've been doing this work for a very long time. They tend to all say in different ways that if you can touch his heart, you can change what he does and what he does every day. And I think about the anger that a lot of our guys are facing. And I think about just if you take D and add it to anger, it turns into danger. And a lot of our guys, if they're not careful, that anger is going to drive them into danger. The work that we're doing with curricula, I think is evident, it's powerful, it's needed, but there has to be a space that goes beyond just co-parenting, budgeting, conflict resolution. It is the heart work, H-E-A-R-T, that is really necessary. Most of the guys might forget the curriculum, but they won't forget how you change their heart. And so I think there's a big piece we got to think about there. My last question, then I'm gonna get to some questions in the chat box. if I think about for you, Harold, you're a guy who has been a part of the arts for some time. You're an artist. You're a poet, slam. I mean, you've been a part of it. Does the arts play a role in helping fathers? And if it does, how should people think about integrating something like the arts in this work?
I absolutely think that arts are apropos to healing and to opening up and making people feel comfortable. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you think about like gatherings of people who have no idea who they are, who each other are. Even if you think about a music festival, right?
Mhm.
Large gathering, thousands of people. They ain't never met each other. But if you're gathered and you're connected by those frequencies, you feel as comfortable as a hug. Then people get up on each other. You
Yeah,
put your arm around another person. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Music, art, the frequency of art comes from the heart. You know what I'm saying? And it allows us to connect as human beings, and it allows us to open up in a way that we didn't think of before. So if you have a healing circle with fathers and you allow people to share a poem or to share something they wrote or you play music once you know have a free dinner for some fathers who want hard luck, it makes them feel so much more warm. You know what I mean?
mhm,
So art, I think, is always apropos to connection. You know, like you have to make sure that you incorporate some type of form of connecting that is eccentric or out the box thinking. You know, everything is not just handshakes and conversation. We have
yeah,
to have that connector somewhere that's on a different frequency.
yeah, yeah. I just can't say thank you guys both enough for just your transparency, your flexibility. Omaha, Omaha, Omaha. We switched and we
Yeah.
made it do what it do. But it's the same with programs. And I can't say enough about the word flexibility in the work that we're doing, but we're at the time where we're now going to transition to a break. But I want to try to get one more thing in here. I'm looking at the chat box to make sure we've answered most of the questions. Tanya Howe said, great point, reaching the heart. I see Courtney Hawk said, I love the idea of incorporating a form of art into sessions with fathers. Jorge Navarez says, at times I feel like a facilitator, I have to focus on the performance of our role. Very, very good points, very good observations. Last one, Isaac Hook said, how do we start the conversation of changing the hearts of women so they won't continue being a barrier for the men that want to be in their children's lives? And I will say this to you, Mr. Cook, stay tuned because we have a couple more sessions where we're going to have that as a part of our conversation. So thanks you guys so much.